Yes, the webinar is open. People are coming in. We'll wait for a few seconds, 1-2 minutes for people to join. Yes, some more people coming. Right. I think I will start with a short welcome, and then people might join in the next 1-2 minutes, but let's be on time. Hello and welcome everybody to our Medianet Now How. This is a format where we inform about different topics for our different industries. This time in this series, we are looking into funding and finance for games. I'm happy that this panel has come together with these people here together today, since regarding public funding, there were a few interesting things happening over the last weeks, which made us change our format a little bit. But we are still happy that we have people from different kind of funding programs here today. This will be moderated by Jenni Wergin, whom I will give over the mic to next. But before, I would like to thank our partners. In this case, this program is funded by Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg. And one more announcement for our interested games visitors and watchers. On December 13th, we will have one more Zoom webinar. GamesNet Berlin Europe introduces, together with Tucana Games, Tucana Interactive, where we will interview them and learn more about their studio and their game Dorfromantik. So mark your calendars for that if you're interested. December 13th, 5 p.m. And now over to Jenni Wergin.
Thanks, Flo. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Jenni, and I'm your host of today's panel, Games, Finance and Funding. For those who don't know me, since January 2022, I'm working for Thunderful Publishing as a product manager. And I worked before that for 4 years for Medienboard as their funding advisor for games. So, hey, welcome. Today I have, as you can see, 3 lovely experts on myself helping us to conquer the mountain of funding and financing. So welcome to Uta Eberhardt. She's a funding consultant at Creative Europe. Joscha Neumann, who is the funding advisor at Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg. And Dr. Matteo Riatti. He is head of the Video Game and Creative Industries Department at German's Aerospace Center, known as DLR. So hello. Today we start with a presentation from Medienboard. Joscha, you can start, introduce yourself, and afterwards I will ask some questions, and then you can ask anything you want in the chat.
All right. Hello, thank you very much for the introduction. I just switched to my little presentation. So when I don't hear any complaint, I assume that you can see it and hear me and everything is fine. So yeah, real quick about Medienboard, what we do and our games funding. So Medienboard is a funding institution here based in Babelsberg, and we fund all sorts of projects like movies, TV shows, events, like conferences, exhibitions, and of course, games. That's why we're here today. And that's what we want to talk about. I am the funding advisor for games. So if you apply for games funding in Berlin-Brandenburg, sooner or later, you will talk to me, probably rather sooner. And I guess, yeah, let's dive right in. Want to talk a bit about like the basics, who can apply, what we actually can provide, and what we need from you then in order to have like a successful application. So first things first, who can actually apply for Medienboard funding? basically all companies based here in Berlin and or Brandenburg, or if the company has a branch here, can also apply as a freelancer. What you can get, quite simple, there are three different types of, or 3 different categories you can apply for. So if you want to make a prototype, you can apply for development funding. We have a new guideline that says, okay, there's a limit now, 300K. It's actually quite a lot. If you want to go like all in and actually release in the end, we have like the full production schedule already ahead of you. You can apply for production funding. There's also a limit 600K. Please note, those are the limits. But we have for each round, there's a specific budget, and which is also limited. So this is like the absolute maximum we can give you. It's also possible to combine both. So production with the development phase before, or you just start developing your prototype, apply prototype funding for that. Then you might try to gather the rest of your budget for the actual production. Might talk to a publisher or two. I guess Jenni can say a few things about that maybe later, and then you apply for production later. So what you get from us is a soft loan. Very important to mention that. So that basically means if your game is successful economically, you have to pay back the loan step by step with the earnings you make with that project. But on the other hand, if you're not successful with it, you don't have to pay back the loan. So it's one way to minimize your risk. Of course, there's always your part of the budget, because we can only provide like up to 50% of the entire budget. But yeah, I guess that helps quite a bit when making a business plan. Some other things we have to mention, of course, since the money comes from the city of Berlin and state of Brandenburg, there's a regional spend requirement. So that means the money should be spent within the region. Like short example, if your budget is like 200K and we give you 100K, roughly 150K of the entire budget should be spent here. And the other could be spent, well, wherever basically. But it's always important to keep that in mind. Spend the money within the region. What's quite nice, you can combine Medienboard funding with other funds. Some of them we will hear later about today. So that means with any or most of other national or international funds, the combination is possible. One specific thing to mention here is the federal funding. They can go up to 70% for production or 80% for prototype funding. I guess Matteo Riatti will tell you a bit about that as well. So now you have the basics about Medienboard funding. If you say, okay, let's go, I want to apply for funding, what do I have to do? Basically, you contact me, you reach out, prepare a little pitch deck or one-pager so that we have some information about the actual project. Then we schedule a call, talk about the project. I guide you through all the steps you have to make, and then you can apply online. So no paperwork included. We just need some documents from you, like your concept, calculation, revenue forecast, your USPs, marketing concept, etc. After that, it takes roughly 2 to 3 months, usually after submitting your application, that we decide on what we can fund and what we can't fund. It's important to note here, our decision is not only based like on your qualifications or if like the numbers work, it's also based on the quality of the concept. So basically, we at the Medienboard group gathers together, we review all the projects, submit it and decide what we will fund. Once you have our confirmation, you can actually start spending the funding on your project. Important, you can't do that before. And then you hopefully make a great game. At some point you can recoup, Medienboard can get some money back. Also, always very nice for us because every euro you can pay back will be reinvested in other projects here in the region. I think it was quite short now, but we can dive deeper in there as well, I guess. And yeah, next funding deadline is actually today in like 6 hours. So that might be a bit like short notice. So the next serious deadline would be February 21st next year. And then you see the other dates. So we have 5 deadlines per year. And then, yeah, always like 2 or 3 months until you have our decision. That being said, feel free to reach out, call me, text me on Discord, or just via email. It's all good for me. Yeah, so far, thank you. And back to you, Jenni.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Josh. I would say Uta, Eberhardt is the next. So please, Uta, tell us a bit about Creative Europe.
Oh, wow. So you want me first before other questioning starts?
Yeah.
I will take slightly more time, I'm afraid, than Joscha did. Can you see what I see? Do you see my slides? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the video games funding of Creative Europe, of the Creative Europe program, which is a European funding program. And the current program started last year and has a running time over the next 6 years. And Creative Europe has quite a complex structure. That's why I would like to show you the next slide to give you an impression.
Uta, can you maybe make a full screen mode?
Oh, is it not?
No, sorry.
Okay, how do I do it? I had it.
Yeah, maybe you're sharing the other monitor, or just double click on the window.
Yeah, maybe I'm sharing the wrong monitor is possible. I stop and I try again. Does it work now? No.
Nope. Yeah.
That's
looks
right
good.
now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Thanks for telling me. It's difficult to see. Okay, what you're seeing now is the structure of the Creative Europe program. And it has, we call it, it's organized in different clusters for the cultural industries, for the media industry, and for the cross-sectoral industry. This is covering journalism and media literacy, so things that are not interesting for us now. But you see the big bunch in the middle, the media part of the Creative Europe program, and there we have 3 clusters again. One is content development, one is the business cluster referring to markets, festivals, training, and so on. And the audience section is referring to the distribution of films and festivals. And as you can see, the video games and immersive content development is part of the content cluster. So it's just to give you an idea on, where to look for your funding possibilities. The next slide is, well, actually an important question, who can apply? Creative Europe is a program that is actually, it's looking for experienced companies, meaning companies that have already produced and commercially distributed works, and the project that are applied for funding has to be commercial, has commercial intention too, and it has to be fit for the international market. All about Creative Europe is about international cooperation and international markets. This is important to keep in mind because not all projects really fit to this kind of funding. For video games and immersive content, for this call can apply video game companies, audiovisual production companies, which is new. This hasn't been so in former times, and XR studios. They have to be established in one of the media member countries, of course. And what is also very important, they have been owned, they have to be owned by the majority of nationals from Dutch media countries, meaning if a UK citizen has established a company in Berlin or in Germany, he wouldn't be eligible to apply for funding because the citizenship of the owner of the company matters. If you are in doubt, it does make sense to call us and we talk about it and see what's possible. As I mentioned, the company applying needs to have a recent experience as well, meaning like a reference project that has been by majority produced and commercially distributed for this call since the 1st January of 2020. And the company needs to have the credit on this project that has been produced already. The personal credit of the CEO wouldn't count. It has been in former times. Some of you might remember this, but this is no longer the case. Funding, the maximum amount of funding is 150,000 euro. We are talking about the development of the project. It's a lump sum. You can apply for less, but regarding the work you will have with establishing the application, 150,000 euro would make sense. You have to co-finance it though by 50%. If you're applying for 150,000 with media, you need to bring 150,000 as co-financing from other sources. Doesn't matter if this is your own pocket or if this comes from other funding schemes or private investment, that doesn't matter. The whole running time of the project can be 36 months, and you will get the funding, the amount you will get in 2 rates. One, if you are lucky, will be the pre-financing of 70% as soon as the grant agreement is signed. And the balance will be paid on a report. So you have to show that 300,000 have been spent on the development of the project, and then you will get the rest of the money. And different than the Medienboard grant, Creative Europe support is a subsidy. So you don't have to repay in case of success. Once you get the money, it's yours, which is the good news. Projects to be funded. Development. I underline development because this really is the criteria for your project application. We don't, or Creative Europe doesn't fund any production of video games and immersive content, but only the development phase. I come to this on my next slide, how we define it, but this is important to keep in mind. And the second important thing is that we don't support all genres of video games, but a very specific one, we call it narrative video games or interactive immersive experiences. They have to tell a story throughout the game. The background is that remember the total budget for 1 year for this call for video games and immersive content Europe-wide is 6 million euro. This is the reason why we focus especially on narrative video games. So again, not all video games fit the funding scheme. Project criteria, which are important, is in-game storytelling. So we don't have just the story in the beginning as an introduction and in the end. No, the story has to be told throughout the gaming. Of course, original content and gameplay matters in the evaluation as well, just like Joscha said from the Medienboard criteria. And what also matters for Creative Europe support is that the project you're submitting for funding has a high international commercial appeal. It has to find its international audience, and you have to show in your application how you intend to reach this international audience. This is just as a brief overlook how we define the development actually of the project. this is really the classical phase from concepting, storylining, the planning, everything you have to do until the first playable version exists. This would be the eligible phase you can finance with the media support. The production phase, as we call it, starts with the testing and and working on the activity of the project. Important as well, maybe in the games industry, you work slightly different than the audiovisuals, the film industry. In the film sector, the Creative Europe program intends to support cooperation between companies, between different countries. You can do this as well with your project, but I know it's not as common as in the film industry. But the applicant company must own the majority of rights to the project you're submitting. And very important as well, we've been talking about the development phase. This has to stretch over a time span of 10 months. So if you are scheduling in the application, if you're scheduling the prototyping start, it has to be 10 months after submission of the application. Important for the evaluation of your proposal will also be the general EU priorities. You've heard of it before. Sustainability and greening of the industry, of course, matter a lot. You have to refer to this in your application form as well. Just like diversity, inclusion, gender balance, international cooperation is nice to have. And actually, it's always a good argument how you will reach the international market if you have partners attached. Innovation is another buzzword. Timeline, next deadline is 1st of March next year. 5 p.m. is Brussels time. On really advised to submit the proposals earlier, not last minute. The results will be published in August. So we also have 3, 4, 5 months actually until the decision is being made in Brussels directly. Grant signature will follow in October, and then after this in November, you will receive the pre-financing if everything goes well. To give you an idea how many projects can be funded with Creative Europe support, I have checked the results of the past 2 years. And we see in 2020, which was the period of the former Creative Europe program, there was really, the budget was half of what we have now. Approximately 140 proposals Europe-wide have been submitted and 32 have been funded. So the funding rate wasn't that big, with 36%. In 2022, this year, we had a double budget of 6 million. Less proposals. That was due to a new application procedure. I will briefly introduce you on the next slide as well. We have 44 funded projects, so we have a funding rate of more than 50%. We'll see how it works for the next deadline. Yeah, I mentioned it. We have a new application procedure with the Creative Europe program, and actually with all European programs, funding programs are handled via the FTOP, the Funding and Tenders Opportunity Portal. The application procedure will be purely online. You will have to download some papers, fill them in and upload them again together with other documents. And what you have to do as step 1, some of you might have done it already. Some of you have to do it if you want to work with Creative Europe. You have to register your company via this portal as well to receive this participant identification code, PIC. And this one you have to really keep well in your files, because with this PIC you have access to all the funding schemes Europe-wide, and you will always be asked for this number. Via the FTOP, all communication will happen, publication of funding calls, as well as the database and for application itself, and also the management of the e-grant of the contract management system will be handled online. The whole procedure will be dealt with the Education and Culture Executive Agency in Brussels. These are our colleagues, and we get our information from there. And they will check your application on validity. And after this, your application forms will go to experts from the industry, which is good news. How I consider it, because your applications will be checked by people that come from the games industry, not by some bureaucrats. So these two experts know how to read your applications and your projects and your financing strategies, so they can be taken seriously. Once you have submitted your application, there is like a functional mailbox where you can ask questions in case something goes wrong or you have noticed some errors. That will be handled directly via the agency. I will briefly show you what the funding and tender opportunities portal looks like. I don't know if it's maybe too small. Can you see it? Maybe depending on the screen. As I mentioned, this portal is for all funding schemes, European funding schemes. I have now put in the search function media, so I received some of the open media calls now, and video games and immersive content development is one of these calls. Once you click on this section, you will get the call paper with additional information, and you will get access to the database once you entered your PIC, where you can start your application. Yeah, do's and don'ts. No last minute applications. That would be my advice, because Creative Europe, the portal takes time to get used to understand the principle, and it also takes time to fill in the different sections, and the application form you download, fill in really in detail, mentioning how your marketing strategy will be and how you will finance the production of the project and so on. And it does take time, and last minute shots are not very promising and usually are not very successful. For the different stages of application, there are different manuals. You need to know this, but most of all, really, if you're intending to apply for Creative Europe, you should contact your regional, local Creative Europe desk. Berlin-Brandenburg, this is us. And we, it makes sense, because we check your proposal, we check your company to see if you would be eligible for once, and we also check if your project fits the guidelines before you start with the application process, which really makes a lot of work. I'm finished. Thank you. This is our contact, Creative Europe desk in Brandenburg. We are sitting in the same building as Medienboard, and we are 4 people working for the desk, Creative Europe desk. And actually, but me, I'm the one, advising on games and tech funding for the program.
Cool. Thank you so much, Uta Eberhardt. I saw many questions in the chat. Be patient a bit. Let's just go and continue with presentations, and then I will ask all of your questions, because some of them are easy to answer for one and other are for everyone, I think. So it's easier. So Dr. Matteo Riatti, please give us an overview about your funding program.
All right. Hello, everyone. And I'll be talking about the federal funding program that has been in place for now about 2 years. Give me a second, I'll search my presentation, or I'll start with a brief look at the homepage of the Ministry of Economic and Climate Action, which is the ministry that is giving out the grants. If you put in, you can have it quite easy if you put in BMWK/games, you'll get to the homepage where you'll find all the information about the funding program. And for the application process, you'll find the information here where it's written Computerspieleförderung des Bundes. There's probably also an English button somewhere above. The most important information at this point, though, is that since it's a federal funding program and the so-called official language, well, the official language is German, your applications will have to be in German as well. There's a lot to read into, and it's not as if you could make so much wrong in writing an application for a fund, but it's really helping a lot for the whole industry if everyone does their homework well, gets these things right in the first place. Uta just said that last minute applications are, well, amongst the worst. We have the same experience. Less time you invest in your application, the lower your chances are of well, getting the application granted in the way that you imagined it would work. So this is the best time you can invest in reading these things and preparing your application, in talking to us, in using the or taking the offer for consulting that there is. And then I'll start my presentation. So you've seen the website from the ministry, a short look at the funding program of the federal funding program that has been instated 2 years ago in order to fund projects with, oh, this number is not, has to be updated by me. I've written here that the video game industry will be funded with up to 50 million euro a year. This has been the case up until about 11 days ago, when the German parliament has raised the amount of money that will be granted within the funding program up to 70 million a year, well, at least for 2023, though it is highly likely that a program which is going as well as it is at the moment will be held at the new level of probably 70 million a year. So, and to counter all the questions that will come in to exactly this topic, the funding program had been stopped 3 weeks ago because the money was all used up. There has been, we'll see more money coming into the program, so it will be reopened, but I have no information when and how this program will restart, probably within the next months, but when exactly, I cannot answer that at the moment, though this is not the important thing for me here to tell you. For me, it's important to show you how the program works, so when it restarts, what is to be taken into account when you want to apply. So the funding entity is it has to be updated as well, I see. The Federal Ministry of not Transport or Digital Infrastructure, it was that ministry, but it has changed. It's now the Ministry for Economics and Climate Action, and we are the entrusted project management agency. So I'm working for the German Aerospace Center, and we are a so-called, well, project management agency. We are handling the applications, and we are working together with you to have these applications in the best possible quality and to have them, ideally to have them granted. So all the information are on the homepage of the ministry, and this funding program may support your projects with up to 50% of the total costs. Money that is not to be repaid, so it stays within your company. You don't have, this is not a how you say Darlehen? It's not a credit you have to pay back. These are subsidies that stay within your company. And this is interesting also, since Joscha has given us the information on the funding program from Berlin-Brandenburg and also Uta. These funding programs may be combined with other funding programs, so you can up your let's say public support up to 70 or 80%. I would always advise to keep everybody in the loop. This is even a requirement for our funding program, and we are in constantly in communication with the others. So if you intend on doing in combining the various funding programs, please keep us in the loop as soon as possible. All right. The current program 2022. I'm sorry, I see that I've missed another thing on this presentation. The current application is valid, submission for deadline for application is valid until the 21st December of 2022, although right at the moment, no applications are accepted by the ministry. This will be taken up within a few weeks or months. I don't know when exactly, but it will restart. And there is no, this is a deadline for the whole program, but there's not a deadline for submission in general, because it is to be expected that this program continues on. And so you can hand in your application once it is ready. And there again, I strongly suggest to have all the documents that you need to apply all together already to hand in. If not, your application may run the risk of taking way more time than expected, or being declined, so as to say. So then if everything goes wrong, it's about 3 to 4 months of time to be calculated with until it is until we have done our work on your application and the ministry may grant it or not. So it is suggested to hand in the project 4 or 5 months before your project would start. Projects cannot be funded that have already been started. That's another very important thing to remember. So consider the funding program as something that you can do for your next project, not for the one you're working on right now. Yeah. Yeah, in order to get the grant, you have to co-finance it by, well, the remaining percentage of money that is not given by us, so as to say. So if you have a grant of 50% of the project cost, we will have to look into your company, which is normally done by seeing your annual reports, the last 2 annual reports that give us an idea of how your company is doing, and if it is able to bring in the other amount, the other 50% for the project, and other documents can also be handed in. So if you have like a publishing agreement with a publisher who gives money to the project, that may be taken as your share of this project. Although there are some things to be considered before signing any contracts. Any signed contract may be interpreted as a project that has already been started. There are some things to be taken into account before you sign these contracts. So in order to go into detail here, I would advise to call us over our hotline or our consulting email address to speak with us before you get into the process of handing in an application, just to get these things right. That is once again strongly suggested. Do not forget that we are put in place in order to help you to get these things right. So it's the best advice you can get. We are working closely with the ministry and have seen now over 300 projects realized within the program. Yeah, this is the information on our Entwurfsberatung. So our offer to you is to hand in all your documents as a draft, and we may well go over them in detail with you and like give you a checklist of things that have to be adjusted in order to make these things right, in order to have the application in a form where it can be handed in, which is the best way of well, of making sure that you do not do any errors that could have been prevented in the first place. So this is the overall idea of how you can hand in your application with the federal funding program. As I just said, it has been in place now for 2 years. It is continuing now with an even bigger budget. There's no cap for your project size. although the percentage of support for your project is digressing on starting at 2 million of the overall project size. So if your project is up to 2 million, you get 50% granted of the costs. If it goes up to 8 million, the percentage lowers up down to 25%. Yeah, and well, as I said, you can combine it with other funding programs, and we are happy once the program restarts to have your applications with us. I'll close with saying this one more time. Please use all the information available on the internet to get prepared very well and hand in only applications after you've used all available consultant offers by us, so that you know that you're handing in something that may really have a chance of being granted.
All right, thank you so much, Matteo, Riatti. And I would like to jump on some points Matteo mentioned and would like to ask Joscha and Uta two things. Can I apply in English in your funding? Yeah, when I want to apply, can I apply in English? One. Number two is Sepp asked something in the chat I also wanted to ask. So it said you aren't allowed to start a project before you get the funding. What does it mean when it comes to GDDs, or let's say block all prototypes and so on? So maybe you two can just answer this. Joscha, you want to start?
Okay. Regarding the language, so English is fine. You can apply in English, but the tool itself is in German. So basically your documents can be in English, but you should be able to understand what we want from you in each category. So it's like kind of mixed. And regarding the other question, it's fine when you're, so for example, you're applying for a production funding. So it's fine for you when there's already a prototype or some kind of like super early version of your game. So it's not like that you have to start from scratch. It is more important to mention, or it's more about when you actually are able to spend the money we can provide. And this is just once we actually confirm that we will fund the project and not before.
All right, Uta.
Yeah, regarding the language, you should apply in English. Actually, that's a simple question. You can, of course, apply in German as well, because German is one of the official EU languages, but the handling at the agency and also for the international experts will be much easier if you submit it in English. So this would be our advice. And I want to add something as well, which is very important. When you contact us as the Creative Europe desk, we are not only there to answer your question regarding the application procedure, we also do check your applications. Given that you don't finish one day before deadline, because we need some time to read it, we have to talk, and you need some time to changes. So that actually makes sense to check with us first before submitting the application. Oh. And regarding the development process for the Creative Europe funding, yeah, the problem is that we are so focused on the development phase, and they have defined a time span of 10 months because the evaluation process takes so long. If you see 1st of March is the deadline, and somewhere in October the grant agreement comes, then these are almost 9-10 months. So that's why they put the date that you can start with development earliest on the day of submission. You can spend your own money basically even before knowing if the financing is closed and if you get the support. This is the principles. Yeah, it's not very satisfying, but yeah, it's the same with all funding schemes.
One question for you, Uta, from the chat. What were the estimate dates again from handling in applications and then receive the first funds?
Yeah, I put it in the chat, the answer, because it's quite complex. 1st of March is the application deadline. The evaluation process with the two experts will, finish in August, and then they will communicate the results. But then only the companies that have received or are selected for funding will receive this message, and they will enter into what we call a gap phase. They will be asked, the companies selected will be asked to hand in some more information on their budgets, on their company books from the past 2 years to check their finances. And if this process is closed and all additional documents are delivered, then the grant agreement can be signed. And this will happen in October. And then the financing comes afterwards. The pre-financing will come in November. This is the time span.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you. So let's assume the ideal case. I founded my first company. Where do I go first if I want to gather funding now? I know that we can combine things in different ways here, but I don't know where to start. So what's the first step? Who wants to answer this one?
Creative Europe is the last step.
Okay. So Joscha.
So I might answer that because I probably am the first step. You should reach out to your regional funding institution first. Talk to us. Once you secured our funding, then you probably should talk to Matteo, Riatti, and follow up. And it's easier when you have our confirmation. I guess you can give some more details there, maybe.
So it's basically geography. You start in Berlin, then you go to the Bundesrepublik Deutschland, and then to Europe. It's to be expected.
Oh, that's clever. So, and please make sure they know of each other, because I know this is a problem. You have to communicate when you want to get funding. Just a small tip from my side. So let's talk about other money we can combine with. Let's say I'm working for a publisher, as you know. So what's when third-party money comes in from publishers, from example, can be other things. Can I combine this? And if so, is there something I have to keep in mind when I want to do it?
Well, for the federal funding program, it's very important to know that we cannot fund projects that have already been started. If you have a contract that is determined and that is legally binding to you to develop a game, then it is to be assumed that you will develop this game because you have already signed corresponding contract with another party. So the taxpayer is obviously not needed in order to fulfill this thing. So in order for us to integrate these publishing agreements into a constellation with the funding, it needs to be visible that on the publishing agreement is like a clause or a condition that is explaining why the funding is needed. Let's say you may be able to acquire an agreement whereas the publisher grants you a certain amount or percentage of total cost of a project, but is saying that this contract is only valid if you can secure the other half, for example, with the federal funding program. Then we have a constellation where you are not yet you have not yet started, you have not yet agreed to a contract which is legally binding to you, since it is still dependent on whether you can attain the federal funding or not. Please do never forget that until you have the grant in your hands, you are only an applicant for the federal funding, and there is you have no right to the money up until the point that you are granted. So signing contracts with publishers before you've secured the money from the funding is a big risk, because first of all, we cannot fund you when this has happened without us knowing that there is a necessity for the funding, and there is no way of making your needs, let's say, there's no way for us to fund your project if it has not been integrated in the way that I said in such a publishing agreement. So it is also quite a danger also for the trust that a publisher invests in you. If you're telling them, yes, I'll get the grant, if you may not know this. So there are lots of reasons why a grant may not be given, or reasons why you might not be eligible as a company or else. This may be the same with Creative Europe and with Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg in some way, I guess. No? Okay, I'll go into that in detail. The thing is that one reason, for example, that has just occurred 3 weeks ago was that the money of the overall project was all gone, was all spent on all the projects that are going. And this is a very lucky thing that the Bundestag agreed to give more money to the project. Now, imagine you signed a contract with the publisher saying that you will get the other half, and you're telling him that we'll manage, no problem. He's signing this thing with you, and then the federal budget is over. And let's put it this way: in times of an energy crisis, there might be other places where money can go as well. So there are other factors that can come into this equation. So up until the point where your funding is really secured by the grant in your hands, you should not sign any contracts with publishers that do not have some kind of an exit strategy. So that is one very important advice. And we talk to you in this in our advisory service. So call us.
Thank you so much. Uta, Joscha, you want to jump on it, or is everything said?
No, I have to jump on it because
yeah, sure.
What? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Creative Europe is totally the opposite. If a games developer has publisher on board, this is the signal that the project is fit for the market and gets some extra money in and, finds his audience. So we would strongly advise, if you have the possibility of a publisher, attach him to the project before applying for Creative Europe.
For Medienboard, it's more like what Matteo Riatti just described. Maybe in some ways it works a bit, let's say, easier. So, of course, it's always nice when you start with your project and you apply, and part of your budget is having a publisher. You can apply, for example, without a signed contract, and letter of intent works for us as well, at least for the application. Of course, once you actually want to sign the contract with us, you have to also sign the contract with the publisher first. So you have to, all parts of your budget, they have to be there. What's also possible, if you, let's say, you apply for funding, you work on your project, works great, and then a publisher approaches you and says, okay, here, another 200K, let's make this game even bigger and better. That's fine, that's possible. Super important here, talk to us. Communication is key. And you always have to argue, or have to show why this is necessary for the game. I mean, in the end, we will support you because we want you to make the best and biggest game you can do. And if it's helpful when a publisher joins here, that's fine. You always have to be a bit careful when it comes to rev share, of course, regarding the recoupment. But we find a way when this might be difficult usually. So always just talk about this.
All right. So another Creative Europe question. Does recent experience still need to require a narrative element? Yes.
There was somebody really attentive. Yes, this is something new. Exactly. For the recent project doesn't need to be a narrative any longer, which is really new. Even you know, I noticed yesterday, I said, oops, there's one word missing in the guidelines. Yes, it is like this. So you have, as a recent experience, any game and any immersive experience would be accountable.
Mhm. Okay, then one for Matteo Riatti. So even though the applications are closed for the moment, can studios ask for your service, like having a meeting with you, ask questions, draft checks, or something like this?
Yes, of course. Our advisory service is always open, though it might not. So maybe there's a limit to some information at the moment because the current call for applications is closed. And since the program might restart not before the deadline of this call has been terminated, it might be that the ministry will issue an updated call for applications, which might change the scope of projects that are to be funded or not, or the how you say Bedingungen, the
Conditions.
The conditions. Yeah, thank you. So we might come to the point in our advisory service where we might say this is something we cannot answer right at the moment. I mean, we've heard that the Minister Habeck has said on the Gamescom that he wishes to focus the scope of the program and to develop it into a certain direction. And maybe this will take action right now because this call for applications will be updated in some way. So, but we're there for you. We'll talk to you and we'll get you ready to stay, in this case, as flexible as possible. So once the program reopens, you are able to hand in your application.
Mm-hmm. Then another one for you. Will the federal funding program switch from first come, first served to more, let's say, Medienboard-like things? So assignments and...
I cannot answer this because I'm not the Zuwendungsgeber. I do not give the money. We just handle the program. And I would say a power to the people. It is up to the to all the companies if they think that this first come first serve is the right tool. Then I think the ministry will be happy to know this. If all the companies consider this not the right tool, then then the ministry will be happy to get to know about this. So if there is like a constructive progress in order to better the program towards the needs of the companies, they'll be happy to know it. In addition, the program will be evaluated. So right at the moment, the current federal funding program, so the ministry is searching for someone to evaluate the program, which is a standard thing. And questions such as this one will also be part of this evaluation. So I'm really, really eager to know what all the studios out there think. What could be better, what could be different, because this program is quite young, and with 2 years running, it is already, well, it's a lot of fun, but I highly doubt that this is already grown up. So there's a lot to improve on, and in order to make this program even better, your opinions as studios, funded ones and not funded ones, everyone's is important.
Let's see. The next one is about the publisher agreement. That's, I think, interesting for everyone here in the round. So is there a document that shows the do's and don'ts we have to consider when making the contract with the publisher? For example, termination. In our case, the publisher wants to see that the German developer grant doesn't accept this clause before he will be willing to cut out something. So I know that there are some things outside you have to write in, and I was in many of your, how do you say, digital workshops about the funding. So maybe someone can answer here what's important, if you have to write something in or not.
I guess that question is again directed at me, at us. Well, I've tried to describe it some minutes ago. The thing is, we do a lot of advisory service, but we're no lawyers, so we cannot help you in writing your contracts. And you as developers and also as entrepreneurs are in charge of handling the contracts that you are signing with other companies. The most important thing to know is that these contracts need to, in order for us to be able to fund a project, we need to see that the project is depending on the funding in some way. Because if you're not dependent on funding, then the taxpayer does not need to help you in order to realize it. So that's the whole basic thing of all of the German federal budget, of all the 500 billion that are spent by the government. So if we see a contract where it's written, let's make an example. This is just one example. If I see a contract where it's written, we have a publishing agreement that is only valid if, let's say, the company is securing the federal funding. Then you have not signed a contract, and you've signed a contract because you have an agreement with the publisher. We know that he may pay up in order to carry his share of the project cost. But if the funding does not come, the project will not be realized. Now we can see that the funding is necessary in order for the project to start. Let's say you have a generic publishing agreement where it's written, we publisher give you this amount of money to develop this game, and it is signed and there's no such clause. Then my interpretation would be that you have signed a contract to develop a game, and you are by all means able to do so without the funding. And this would be the official reading of your application. Then we would say, why do you need money if you have already signed a contract where you have already agreed on something, and there's no way for us knowing that you're not able to do it by yourself. So that's the very important difference in these two examples, just to be taken into account. If we are to go into detail, we'll have to talk to this in our advisory service. So I'd suggest to hit us up for a call for a detailed look on these things.
Thanks. Uta, are the results of this year's Creative Europe funding published yet? Do you know?
We are still waiting for the official list because the companies from the last selection round there have been informed now and asked to submit this additional papers. So they are in this gap phase now. And if all companies have delivered and really can sign their grant agreement, then the official list will be published. But it takes even longer than we expected.
All right. And in general, question for all of you, is it possible to receive the slides or the recording? I don't know. The recording is something Flo has to know. But the other ones you can answer. I don't know if you want to gather it or just have a call afterwards, but sorry.
Like, not sure how helpful my slides. Oh, sorry, Uta. Go first.
Same idea. Should we send the slides to Florian and he submits it? I'm okay with that.
I guess I could submit my slides, but I just used more or less like the buzzwords and said the rest. Not sure how helpful they will be. Yeah, why not? But in general, always feel free to reach out.
All right. And I would really highly advise you to have these chats and advising meetings before. Yeah, that's all from my side. Let's see if I forgot something. Or maybe Flo has an eye also on the chat. Maybe you can tell me if I forgot a question there. Otherwise, I have a last one. Okay, cool. So my last one is after, let's say, the stressful 11 days. That's not really 11 days, but after the few weeks of hustling with funding and don't know what to do in the future, I was wondering if this is something that could happen also for Medienboard and Creative Europe. That, of course, I know you received money as well from, it's not your company money, let's say. And what does all of this means for the studios? Everyone can say something about this. I also can say and add something later. Yeah, maybe Joscha, you can start.
So in order to answer the first part, I mean, basically, yes, of course, that could happen. It's not very likely, though. Works a bit different, the Medienboard funding, and it's secured for the next 2 years, as far as I know. And for the future, it looks very good. Of course, it's always possible, since the money comes from the state, or in this case, from the city of Berlin and Brandenburg. As the politics, they changed their mind. Funding might change as well, but for now, it's looking all good, and you can plan with it. What was the second question?
What does things like this means for the studios? It's more a local question.
I mean, in general, of course, it's better for them if they know what's going on, and when they can plan like for the next 2-3 years. So it was quite a hustle, I guess, for many of them, and an even bigger relief now to hear, okay, there will be money, even more money in the future, and they can count on the federal funding. I think that's great news.
All right. Uta, you want to add something to this?
Actually, cutting the Creative Europe budget is not a very likely scenario, because the program over the 7 years is financed by its member states, which is not only the countries of the European Union, but beyond, like Norway. Countries like this are member of the Creative Europe program as well, and they all put money into the big pot. And then it's just settled. You know, it takes like almost 2 years to fix the budget. And that's why our program started late, because it was negotiation over 1.5 years. But now the budget is set. And actually it represents the conviction of the European Union that culture and creative industries are really substantial for European identity. And by giving money into this industry, they're trying to shape a vision of Europe as well, you know, fighting fake news as well as supporting creative and innovative ideas. So no, I don't think there will anything happening in the next 4 years to this program. On opposite, we are upstocking the budget for support programs for Ukrainian artists, for instance. So.
And I can also add from a publisher side, because this is where I work and I know. So also the government funding, but all regional funding or funding itself is super important. Also for, of course, the developers to make their dreams real, let's say. But from our side, it's save money, you know, and the company that's giving part of the money doesn't own any rights, what is good, because more than one right owner is always super complicated. And also smaller publishers can minimize their risk in making or doing bigger projects. And also, as I know and as everyone knows here, thanks to the government funding, the projects were growing, the teams were growing, and also local fundings, of course, are super important to ensure that young teams can do projects, that senior teams can make bigger projects, and so on. So I would also say this is one of the most important things, and a very good infrastructure we have now in Germany. And I'm looking into the future and see what it holds. Thanks for joining me today, everyone. And thanks, Flo, for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a nice evening.